This footage was recorded on August 4th in Kherson, Ukraine. A Russian drone is hunting, or rather tormenting, a vendor at a market as he tries to flee. Eventually, it strikes. The man survived, but many others have not been so fortunate. Many others because this drone safari, as Volodymyr Zelensky describes it, is not an isolated incident. Our OSW expert visited Kherson last year, and in this video he'll tell us how Russians hunt civilians in Kherson. Kherson was occupied by Russian forces from March 2nd, 2022 until November 11th. After the city was liberated by Ukrainian forces, it became the target of intensive shelling. The city of Kherson was liberated in November 2022. Since then, it has no longer been an area of active maneuver warfare, and the front there is stable. The Dnipro River separates the Ukrainian and Russian forces, and fighting consists primarily of aerial attacks. Above all, there are drone attacks from both sides, as well as artillery fire. Both armies use the full range of weapons they have available in this area. However, this is a lower priority section of the front. Russia's objective in Kherson is, above all, to demonstrate that the city, which was liberated from Russian occupation, will never again enjoy peaceful, normal life. The aim of these attacks is to terrorize the civilian population while also creating difficulties for the Ukrainian military, which must devote resources to protecting civilians and at the same time attempt to disrupt Russian logistics in the occupied part of Kherson Oblast on the left bank of the Dnipro River. Every week, the Russians carry out hundreds of attacks on Kherson, including attacks against civilians. Every means of transport is a potential target for the Russians. And when they cannot find a better target, they often use drones simply for entertainment, for tormenting civilians. There have been many cases, including those like an elderly woman tending to her goats. There are hundreds of such incidents every year. Ukrainians living in Kherson constantly talk about it. The soldiers who observe how the Russian army operates on the Kherson front also say that the skill level of Russian drone pilots varies greatly, that it's obvious some of them are simply just learning how to operate them. It's said that the Russians also send trainee drone pilots, including recent graduates of military schools and inexperienced operators, to gain practice on live targets. Civilians become easy targets whenever the Russians decide they have no more important objective or simply decide to harass and terrorize the civilian population. And that is when the attacks, like the one we saw at the market against the vegetable vendor, are carried out. The case of Russians hunting civilians in Kherson has come under the scrutiny of international organizations. Human Rights Watch published a report documenting dozens of deliberate Russian attacks against civilians. The UN Independent International Commission for Inquiry on Ukraine says Russia's actions are widespread, systematic, and constitute a coordinated state policy. It also notes that these practices may amount to crimes against humanity. By August 1st, more than 60 civilians were injured as a result of attacks by the Russian army. 12 people were killed, and around 70% of those attacks were carried out by drones. We see that a significant portion of Russia's operations on this section of the front involve drones of various types, primarily the smallest ones, the FPV drones, which are also used along the entire front line as the main means of eliminating targets. The scale is enormous, and there are even more attacks than these figures suggest. But fortunately, not all of them end with civilians being killed or wounded. It's also worth noting that around 30% of the injuries suffered by civilians in Kherson are caused by other weapons, primarily artillery. The Ukrainian forces are doing everything, or rather everything they can, to protect their citizens. The city tries to manage it by deploying small mobile groups that move through different parts of the city, according to geographical sectors, and take down these drones. Usually, they consist of 2 soldiers using machine guns. A drone can be successfully shot down from 100 meters, sometimes even from 300 meters. The soldiers serving in these mobile groups say that on a good day, they can shoot down as many as 30 drones, which of course is only a fraction of the total number of drones and attacks that the Russians carry out against the people of Kherson. Electronic warfare systems are also used to neutralize drones, especially those operating via radio signals. Protective nets are important here because when it comes to protecting civilians, the drones that used to drop grenades were extremely difficult to counter, and those drones caused the greatest number of civilian casualties. Now, if the Russians use an FPV drone, which must be aimed directly at a specific person, then in areas where nets are installed and grenades cannot simply be dropped, there are somewhat fewer attacks on civilians than there were a few months ago. It's also worth noting that for several months, Ukraine has been conducting an operation to weaken Russia's logistics at the operational level. These so-called middle strikes also disrupt Russian logistics and reduce the number of drones reaching Russian operators. According to Ukraine's military administration in Kherson, there are more than 800 attacks every day. The situation is most severe in the districts closest to the Dnipro River, as well as in the villages near Kherson that are also close to the river. Some Ukrainians who live there have relocated from those surrounding villages into the city. So the city continues to function as best as possible under the current circumstances. We talked about the nature of the war, including the use of drones, in another video on our channel. The link is in the description. Despite the serious danger, Kherson continues to function. How is that possible, and why do people stay in such a dangerous region? It's estimated that around 60,000 people currently live in Kherson. During our visit there last year, we saw that in the districts located farther from the river, life continues relatively normally, well, as normally as possible under these circumstances. The attacks are heard almost constantly. Artillery from both sides can be heard, as well as drones. It's now common for civilians to carry drone detectors. These are sensors or devices that detect drone signals. Of course, the risk remains very high because attacks happen every day. For example, a relatively safer part of the city might be hit by artillery, or it might be a guided aerial bomb, which carries explosives capable of leveling entire buildings and causes massive destruction. As we know from Kharkiv and from other cities, people can become accustomed to almost anything, and they try to carry on with their lives. They never know whether today might be the day they personally experience an attack, but somehow they try to live with that risk while doing everything possible to stay safe. People survived the occupation, and they say that it was the worst experience of their lives. They endured torture chambers that operated throughout the city. People were abducted and disappeared, later murdered or tortured, and women were raped. The experience of occupation has, in a way, made the people of Kherson more resilient to today's difficult conditions. These harsh experiences have hardened the city's residents, and despite the daily attacks, 60,000 people continue to live there. Several markets remain open, as well as post offices, flower shops, and supermarkets. And there's even a functioning theater, although it operates underground. Life is certainly not easy, but the people of Kherson say that everything is better than living under occupation. Thank you for watching. Our documentary, Kharkiv, A Chronicle of Survival, shows precisely how a city functions during wartime. And if you want to watch more coverage like this one, subscribe to our channel.